All right. Hey everyone, this is Kit Cabello with Hard Lens Media. I'm just gonna give it a few more seconds before the live stream fully gets started. So I want to make things very clear, especially in regards to what's happening with this presidential election cycle. We're seeing a rise in popularity with a lot of progressive and independent Democratic candidates, most notably Senator Bernie Sanders, and now Representative Tulsi Gabbard. With the aftermath of the Democratic primaries, we're seeing Tulsi Gabbard actually gain more momentum, especially after the Democratic debate on June 26th. Now, here's a couple of things we need to point out. After that debate, she was the most searched candidate and silenced from corporate media. But as it stands right now, we're looking at Senator Kamala Harris and Senator Elizabeth Warren mostly being covered by corporate media. But why are they choosing to ignore Representative Tulsi Gabbard? Well, for some reason, I guess they're threatened by the fact that she is promoting a very strong foreign policy. And the reason why the establishment media is specifically just turning against her, specifically towards Representative Tulsi Gabbard, is because she's calling for a message of peace and changing U.S. foreign affairs. We've seen since this war on terror first started, countless U.S. troops and treasury is being wasted in regime change wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all over the world. And it's devastating to the American people because we're the ones who are really paying for it. American families, especially those who have servicemen and women in uniform serving overseas, are the ones that are paying for it. But corporate media wants to turn a blind eye to it. And now recently, there's been a couple articles that have come out that should get coverage or have, at least there should be more coverage in regards to Representative Tulsi Gabbard. So first, let's get started off with this one opinion piece, and it's actually from Fox News of all places. Hear me out on this one. So first, right now we're seeing the very fact that they're talking about the aftermath of the June 26th debate, and how really she could be a threat to President Donald Trump should she get the nomination. For example, and this has to really partly deal with her response with how the corporate media is turning a blind eye to her. This is a quote from Representative Tulsi Gabbard. "I think the media has such an incredible responsibility to report the news and the truth, and that's just not what we're seeing anymore. Me and my campaign have been on the receiving end of very intentional smear efforts trying to undermine our campaign, coming through, NBC News, quoting articles that are completely baseless. I did an interview with George Stephanopoulos, and he says, well, this article in the Daily Beast says Putin supports your campaign. Based on what? Nothing. Really nothing. And American voters are seeing this firsthand. Not only Democratic voters, but Republican voters. And that's something Representative Tulsi Gabbard is successfully doing. She's talking about a strong message for peace, and this is something that Republican voters, Democratic voters, and independent voters can all agree on. We're the ones who are paying for this war on terror. We're the ones who are constantly being lied to. Let us not forget that the whole reason why we invaded Iraq in the first place was supposedly that there were weapons of mass destruction that we have never found. And now we still have U.S. troops there, and also U.S. troops in Afghanistan. It's ironic now that the only thing that's really being at least acknowledged is the fact that Representative Tulsi Gabbard put Tim Ryan in his place, specifically when he's saying that we need to have a much more larger presence, and him incorrectly stating that it was the Taliban that flew planes into the Twin Towers on 9/11. It goes to show you that most of the Democratic establishment candidates, specifically those that are bought by the military-industrial complex, will continue to lie to the American people and think that they can get away with it. Representative Tulsi Gabbard did 2 tours overseas in Iraq, where she saw a lot of her fellow service members actually get wounded and maimed and killed overseas. And that changes a person. And right now, President Donald Trump, he's right now trying to bring a peace deal negotiation with North Korea, something that has also impacted Representative Tulsi Gabbard. In fact, in an article from Hawaii News Now, right after a trip from Chicago, Representative Tulsi Gabbard was speaking to the mayors, in her home state of Hawaii. And so Gabbard began to defend her focus on foreign policy, telling the mayors that what she refers to regime change wars are costing too much and taking funding that could be used at the local level. Because let's face it, everything that happens on the national level affects everyone at the local level. And here's a quote from Representative Tulsi Gabbard. That's why it's imperative that every mayor, every leader at every level of government take action, stand up, and speak out about this danger of nuclear war and we're facing. And speak out against these wasteful regime change wars and this new Cold War that's sucking money out of our pockets and our communities, she told a session of women mayors. We need a radical change in our foreign policy to prevent this kind of thing from happening and to make sure that our children and our families and generations to come can live free from the fear of nuclear war. And this is something that has impacted Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Let's rewind back the clocks when she was being interviewed by Joe Rogan on his show, and how the state of Hawaii was given a false alarm about an incoming missile coming to the island. That was probably such a horrifying experience for everyone in that state to deal with. But it's a reality because this is what happens when we have an out-of-control military-industrial complex. Heaven forbid if that was an actual real attack and how many lives that could have been lost if that really was a reality. And this is why we need to change our foreign policy, because we are just at the edge of a fallout that we can never recover from. So, and on a final note too, and this is something that Representative Tulsi Gabbard is actually gaining a lot of traction on, and it's interesting that The Hill, of all places, reported on this. It's basically stating how the United States needs to stop pretending that Saudi Arabia is an ally. We have, at least as it stands right now, especially with the American government, especially those in the establishment or those connected to the fossil fuel industry and the military-industrial complex, we have a lot of trade deals and economic relations with Saudi Arabia, who in turn supports a lot of fundamentalist groups. And the problem is that we are seeing this alliance lead to dangerous grounds and could potentially lead to a military conflict with Iran. We can't have that. And this is something, again, that Tulsi Gabbard is calling out against. But notice, there's a silence from the establishment media. There's silence of the media not reporting Representative Tulsi Gabbard. It's a sign that they're afraid. It's a sign also that because our media is owned by corporations, they don't want anyone that's going to tip the apple cart. You know, it's surprising enough that Politico is saying that the Democratic primary field is now wide open. They're mostly basically acknowledging the fact that Biden did such a terrible job, and they're somewhat begrudgingly acknowledging Bernie Sanders, but yet there's all this fanfare for Kamala Harris. It's interesting that, you know, if we just go back to a few months ago, Kamala Harris was low in the polls, and it's because people were checking out her political record and her voting record, and not a lot of people were impressed. But then when she had that little verbal exchange with Biden, she began to rise in the polls. And I think it's very important to note that a lot of people in the Democratic establishment party, like Biden, like Kamala Harris, like Cory Booker, like Pete Buttigieg or Beto O'Rourke, they're all friends with each other. And it's not surprising that, you know, a lot of people knew about Biden's political record and his voting record. But yet, that same article from Politico chooses to ignore Tulsi Gabbard and the very fact that after the June 26th debate, she was the most searched candidate. The night before, it was Senator Elizabeth Warren. So the media is afraid of Representative Tulsi Gabbard. The establishment is afraid of Representative Tulsi Gabbard. But yet, as we're checking out the polls, as we're checking out the very fact that we're going to be slowly entering the second debate and potentially later on the third debate, we're seeing Tulsi Gabbard gain more individual contributors to where she can secure her spot for the third debate stage. And she is somebody that needs to be up there. Her message is for peace. Her message is calling out against the actions of climate change. Her message is for a stronger domestic policy. We need to remember that progressive and independent candidates will constantly be smeared and attacked because they're actually talking about issues that impact a lot of Americans. And for some reason, the establishment media and the establishment Democratic Party refuse to acknowledge that Tulsi Gabbard can actually do something that Clinton couldn't do, Biden can't do, and Kamala Harris can't do. And that is actually get support from also independents, conservatives, libertarians, Democrats, Republicans. It doesn't matter. She's able to build a strong coalition. We all see that money in politics is crippling our democracy, and most of this money is coming from the military-industrial complex and the fossil fuel industry that want to continue regime change wars. And this is, again, an issue we all have to address and deal with. It's taking away all our money and resources for education, infrastructure, and actually building something that a social infrastructure that can actually deal with the changes of climate change. And plus, we have this ridiculous student loan debt crisis that's affecting millions of young people. So at the end of the day, what we have to remember is that we have to keep an open eye out for when the media is going to choose to ignore progressive and independent candidates. Now, to credit's due, The Hill and Fox News, they actually did somewhat good articles on Representative Tulsi Gabbard, which is a rarity. Most of the time when you Google Representative Tulsi Gabbard, it's nothing but smear articles. And the only way where you can actually find quality interviews or coverage on Tulsi Gabbard is through independent media. And that's why Hard Lens Media is here. So, if you want to support Hard Lens Media, please make sure you're subscribed, hit that ring bell notification, or if you really want to support independent media, we do have a Patreon page. Your support is the main heart and backbone to everything that we do. This is Kit. Peace, and let's all do what we can to build a better future.